Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And Middlesbrough could be preparing for a mammoth January transfer window. The club go into the winter window with a huge selection dilemma, with no less than 14 players currently out injured at the time of recording. I will go through all of them a little bit. I'm not going to go into too much detail because this video could end up lasting for absolutely hours if I was to go into the ins and outs of each individual case. But to rattle through the 14 players who are currently out or suffering with niggles at the moment, so we've got Seny Dieng, Rav Vandenberg, Paddy McNair, Lewis O'Brien, Hayden Hackney, Matt Crooks, Riley McGree, Marcus Forss, Emmanuel Lath, Josh Coburn, Morgan Rogers, and Izzy Jones, who are currently out. They are out at the moment and could be out for the next few weeks. We've also got the long-term absentees of Tommy Smith and Darragh Lenihan, who are both confirmed to be out for the full season. And that, as a result, has left Michael Carrick with a threadbare squad. We saw it against Port Vale in the Carabao Cup quarter-final clash. Yes, it was a night that ended particularly well. We won 3-0, secured our place in the semi-finals against Chelsea. But the just taking a look at the team that was left on the pitch at the end, even on that night, players like Lath and Izzy Jones, they hobbled off in the second half, and as it stands at the moment, that these players are touch and go going into the Christmas period. Even if they are available for selection, a lot of these players are nursing minor knocks as well. So even the players who are available, they're not necessarily fully fit, fighting fit going into these fixtures. They're just players who are suffering minor scrapes and minor knocks, but don't really have the opportunity to rest and recover due to the widespread injuries elsewhere. So while I think the hope is well, the hope and the expectation is that some of these players will make a comeback in the coming days or weeks, or probably hopefully before the end of the January transfer window. I do think it's going to play a massive role on on what the club are going to be looking to do in the January window as well. Um, We've also got the added complication that there are a couple of major international tournaments happening during the month of January. Riley McGree and Sammy Silvera have both been called up to the Australian national squad, their 26-man squad for the Asian Cup. Um, that tournament runs from January the 12th to February the 10th. So just under a month that tournament lasts for, but the players will be required to meet up for pre-tournament training from the 1st of January. So that means, I think for Silvera, obviously he's a player who has been involved in recent weeks. He has been fit. He's just starting to kind of find his feet a little bit. Probably the injuries have helped him more than anyone else, due to getting his opportunity and getting a few more minutes on the pitch to start to show what he can do and start to show that he is adapting to life in the English game. Um, Riley McGree's a bit of a more difficult one because he's been out injured for almost 3 months now. His last fixture was on October the 3rd. So yeah, we're talking coming up 3 months now that he's been on the sidelines. We get to see that he's fully fit. Michael Carrick has spoken in the media this week and said that he's not far away. Not necessarily he's going to be playing this week, but hopefully he'll be playing at some point over the Christmas period. But if he's going to be linking up with the Australia squad on January the 1st, that's also a little bit of a slap in the face for Middlesbrough. I'm not saying that anything untoward has sort of happened in there. It could simply be a case of bad luck and bad timing, but it would be just typical Middlesbrough to get arguably our best player and our most important player back from injury. Probably give him a few minutes in the few games over Christmas, then he jets off to the other side of the world to compete in a tournament for a month where, let's be honest, he's probably one of Australia's most important players. So he's not just going to be sitting on the sidelines. He's not going to be travelling over there to be part of the supporting cast and get a minute here or there. He'll be going over there and hoping to play. Because playing in the Asian Cup's a massive deal for Australia. He'll be wanting to play. He'll be wanting to get minutes under his belt to help his country. Um, the national team will be hoping that he can do his bit as well, hoping that he can play as many minutes as possible. So that's going to be a bit of an anxious one for Middlesbrough fans as well, because if he is just recovering from injury, even if he is back and available for selection, he's not going to be fully fit by any means. And so jetting off to the other side of the world and undertaking the mental and physical toll of a major international tournament, that could be really tricky for Middlesbrough to handle and really tricky for him. And the last thing we want is for him to be returning at the end of the tournament, whether that's the start of February or the 10th of February, if Australia get all the way to the final or win it, and Riley McGree be out injured again or be tired or fatigued, because then really we're looking towards March before we're going to get anything near the best of Riley McGree, which is going to be a real shame considering, like I said, he's been out since the start of October. I digress a little bit on that. Seny Dieng is also another player who is likely to be away for the month of January. Although at the time of recording, Senegal haven't announced their squad for the African Cup of Nations. It's pretty much inevitable that Seny Dieng will be selected as part of that squad. He is their top goalkeeper. He's been suffering with a bit of a thigh injury of late. He picked it up just last week, and it's a minor knock. I don't think it's something that's going to keep him out for a long period of time. I'm not exactly sure when he'll be back. Hopefully, he'll be back over the Christmas period. But again, that's a bit of a blow that he's going to be disappearing off for a month as well. I guess the only silver lining from a Middlesbrough point of view in the goalkeeping department is that Tom Glover didn't make the cut for the Australian national squad. Obviously, that's a real blow for him. He'll have been wanting to represent Australia and be part of that squad with Riley McGree and Sammy Silvera at the Asian Cup, but he hasn't made the cut for that. But for Middlesbrough, there is a bit of a silver lining because that does mean that even if Seny Dieng is disappearing off to the African Cup of Nations, we will still have Tom Glover and Jamie Jones to battle for that goalkeeping jersey. There had been speculation that Middlesbrough might enter the transfer market to sign another goalkeeper to cover for that, because if we had been without our first and second choice goalkeeper, we could have been in a bit of a pickle. There'd been talk about signing someone new to come in. There'd also been talk of recalling someone like Soldrin or Zach Hemming, who'd been out on loan. But again, that wouldn't have been the ideal solution either, because while they're getting first team football at the moment, they might have played a few games during January, but then they've just been sat on the sidelines and sat rotting in the under 23s for the rest of the campaign, which would have been a waste of their time. So I think it's worked out quite well for Middlesbrough that Tom Glover will be sticking around. If Dieng does go off with Senegal, it means that Glover will be the man to hold the gloves. I think we've seen against Port Vale that he's a decent goalkeeper. He's someone who's more than capable of slotting in for Dieng, and that does kind of solve a problem from that point of view. But I think from Middlesbrough going into January, I think all of these factors with the injuries and the international selection, it does mean that we are going to be going into January with some real work that will need to be done. So with the January transfer window just a matter of days away, what business do Middlesbrough need to be doing? So often the January transfer window is seen as a reactive window, really. I think most clubs have their transfer strategy. They know what they're wanting to do. And in terms of signing major players, their major signings, where they're paying big transfer fees, a lot of the time that happens in the summer when they've got a bit of an idea of what the season ahead is going to hold for them. Their budgets are fresh. It all gets decided going into the summer transfer window, and that helps clubs. Whereas in the January transfer window, it's often reactive based on what's happened in the first half of the season. Clubs in Premier League are stuck in a relegation battle. Can they get players in to give them an extra little bit of quality to help them get out of trouble? Clubs in the title race, it's exactly the same. Clubs in the Championship, it's also the same as well. Teams who are going for automatic promotion will be looking for added bit of quality just to kind of help to get them over the line and see off their rivals. For a club like Middlesbrough, it'll be what can we do to help us get into the playoff mix or deeper into the playoff mix. At the time of recording, we're not massively in the race for the playoffs. Personally, we're not where I'd hoped that we would be at this stage of the season. But I do admit that given the amount of injuries that we've had, I think we're doing bloody well to be even within the conversation for the playoff places. We've still got a lot of work to do in the second half of the season. There's going to be a lot of ground to make up. Maybe not a lot of ground, actually, that's probably unfair, but there is going to be significant ground to make up and a few teams to overtake. So I think the odds are against Middlesbrough for getting into the playoffs. But I think that's why the January transfer window is going to be so important, because as it stands at the moment, we've barely any first team players available for us. And even when they do come back, it's going to take a little while for these players to get back to full fitness. You've got to remember that even when players have been out for a matter of weeks or a matter of months, it's not just a case of being available for selection and then they're good to go. The longer that they're out injured, the longer it takes for them to get to full match sharpness and full match fitness. And so that means for a lot of these players who have been out since October, in Riley McGree's case, or November, um, these are people who are going to take a little bit of time to get up to speed. And for Middlesbrough, they don't have that luxury of time if they are going to be closing the gap on the playoff places. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what Middlesbrough are going to do. I think in terms of the areas that Middlesbrough would have been targeting, the main area, which to be honest was evident before all of these injuries took off, was someone to start up front. Um, we saw, well, so far this season, we've seen Josh Coburn, we've seen Emmanuel Latte-Lath. They've been the two players who've been competing for that centre forward position. And let's be honest, both of them have done reasonably well. I think Josh Coburn, obviously, over the summer, he was expected to head out on loan. And probably more due to the fact that we didn't sign a striker over the summer. He was the player who was tasked with leading the line early on in the season, and he did a decent job. He linked up well with the players around him. He scored a few goals, not loads, but he did score a few, and so there is clearly potential there. Emmanuel Latte-Lath, he came in from Atlanta. He's come in, he scored a few goals. He's looked right. He's pacey, he's strong. He causes lots of problems for defenders, and so from my point of view, there's no issue with either of these strikers. I think both of these players are players who can and should be given an opportunity to impress for Middlesbrough in the second half of the season and beyond. I think for now, it's just kind of bringing in someone who can almost like take the burden off them a little bit. I think both of these players are almost development sort of signings, to use that awful phrase. I don't believe I've just used that phrase, but they're kind of players who are kind of there for the long term. They're sort of work in progress players who this season it's about adapting to the championship, and then maybe next season we'll see best of them at this level after they've had a bit of time to adapt. And what Middlesbrough need is someone who can come in and just really hit the ground running, whether it's someone who is experienced at championship level, someone who is a hot prospect at one of the Premier League clubs and is looking for loan experience, just someone who's here and ready to make an immediate impression. I want to go back to Cameron Archer last season, for example. He came in and he wasn't someone who was expected to take 2 or 3 months to get up to speed. He came in, he started scoring goals immediately. It was absolutely essential for Middlesbrough, and the goals that he scored played a massive part in helping Middlesbrough into the playoffs. It's that sort of signing that I think Middlesbrough will be looking for in January for someone to come in and lead the line. If there is a good deal to be had in terms of a permanent signing, I think Middlesbrough will look to do it. But as I mentioned before, I think a lot of the forward planning, not just from Middlesbrough, but from other clubs, clubs do look to make their permanent signings over the summer when there's maybe a little bit more value for money. You've got to remember that in January, a lot of clubs don't want to sell their players because there's a limited window to actually be able to replace them, and so that's why there ends up being a lot more loan signings that end up happening in that time. So I think that'll be something that Middlesbrough look to do. I think as it stands at the moment, Middlesbrough have two long-term domestic players on loan. Sam Greenwood, who's on a season-long loan from Leeds, and Lewis O'Brien, who's from Nottingham Forest. So that means that as it stands at the moment, there are two long-term loan spots available for players for Middlesbrough to sign from clubs in England, whether that's from the Premier League or the Championship on loan. So that's something that I think Middlesbrough will be looking to do. There's also a question about Sam Greenwood. As we know, he's got that £1.5 million option in his loan deal, which Middlesbrough, I'm sure, will be looking to take up at some point, whether it's now or at the end of the season. Again, like I said, Leeds might not be wanting to lose a player like Sam Greenwood permanently in this transfer window, so it might be that they're wanting to see what happens at the end of the season. If they get promoted, they might be more willing to get rid of him. If they end up missing out on promotion, then Sam Greenwood might be the sort of player that they want back at Ellen Road. But if there is that option there, Middlesbrough will have to have those conversations at that point. But in terms of the loan arrangements, if Middlesbrough were to trigger that £1.5 million release clause in January, that would potentially free up another spot for another loan player to come in. If that's how that rule works, that was my interpretation of it, which I'm not entirely sure is accurate. But that would be a potential for Middlesbrough to explore. And so yeah, so signing a striker is going to be very, very important. There could be a couple of outgoings as well, which I think is interesting to take on board. If you'd asked me maybe 2 or 3 months ago, there'd be a handful of players that I thought could be heading for the exit door this month. Middlesbrough were signing striker. I'd be saying that Josh Coburn will probably be heading out on loan, going out and getting regular first team football for probably a club in the Championship, but maybe the bottom half of the Championship. Paddy McNair, he's probably one of Middlesbrough's highest earners, and he's out of contract at the end of the season. So he's a player who, in good times, Middlesbrough might have been looking to cash in on, get a little bit of a transfer fee for him, given that a new contract is probably unlikely for him at the end of the season, and if Middlesbrough had subsequent like suitable cover for him. It probably would have been a player that would have been dispensable in January, but I think given the amount of injuries that are going on at the moment, including McNair being injured himself and the lack of options that we do have at centre back at the moment, I'd be very surprised if Middlesbrough were looking to sell anyone, because I think at the moment it's just about keeping as many numbers in the squad as possible. There are players who could head out on loan. I have mentioned Josh Coburn there. Um, a month is a long time in football, and so if Middlesbrough do sign a striker or even two strikers, people who can play up top, he could be someone who is allowed to leave on loan. I think it's also worth looking at people like Alex Gilbert, Law McCabe, Cal Kavanagh, all players who could probably do with more regular first team football. But again, they're probably decisions that won't be made until the end of the January transfer window, when Middlesbrough kind of know what they're dealing with. We'll know what players are back in contention, because we do not want to be leaving ourselves short of numbers going into the second half of the campaign. And as it stands at the moment, at the time of recording, with 14 players out injured, all of those players are absolutely crucial at the moment, and we cannot afford to be letting anyone leave. But should the situation improve over the coming weeks and we start to get five, six, seven, eight of those players back in contention, then they are the sort of players who would be allowed to move on for a loan spell in League One, League Two, just to get some regular football under their belt and kind of continue their development. So I think for Middlesbrough, I think signing a striker is going to be paramount for us anyway. I think there's also going to be an argument for getting reinforcements in several other positions. To be honest, I'm not saying that we're going to sign a handful of players, but as it stands at the moment, we're looking pretty threadbare across the pitch, and so that's something that we are going to be needing to look at. I think it's going to be a reactive window. I think it's really going to depend on what players are available to us as we move into the second half of January. If players are starting to look like they're going to be out injured until the second half of January or into February or into March, that's when I think Middlesbrough will be looking for sort of solutions to deputise for that, because central midfield is one that particularly struggling with at the moment. With Hayden Hackney out injured, it means that we've got Dan Balassa and Johnny Howson in central midfield. Howson, being completely frank, he should not be playing the amount of games that he is at the moment, just because I think had everything been hunky dory, if Hackney had been fit, I think Howson would have been playing maybe like one, or maybe starting like one game in three, maybe yeah, one and a half in 3 games sort of thing. Getting a few minutes and playing a vital role for the team, but probably not being a regular starter. But he's been having to play every week, and as we go into December, as everyone knows, as the old cliche goes, the fixtures do come thick and fast in the Championship, and so he has been playing an awful lot of football, and that's something that is worth keeping an eye on as well, because while Hayden Hackney will hopefully be back in the next few weeks, I think it is an area that we could probably do with a bit more good quality anyway, because while Hackney is head and shoulders above the other central midfielders at the club when he's fully fit, I do think we need maybe a little bit more physicality in that area as well. And so that's something that we could maybe have done with looking at anyway. But particularly given the injuries and the lack of fitness in the squad at the moment, that's another position that I'd be expecting us to look at. We could potentially go for a wide player. We could potentially go for another centre back, but as I said, it all depends on what players are going to be available going into the second half of the season, because ultimately the target is for Middlesbrough to secure promotion, or to at least get into the playoff picture. And so I think if we are to do that, there's no time to waste on waiting for these players to get back to fitness. We need players who are available and players who can really make an impact and get some wins on the board for us. And so that's something that we are going to be looking at. And for me, I think January is going to be a really transformative transfer window, with players coming in, even if they are loan signings. We do need those numbers. We do need that quality if we are to make up the gap on the top six, and ultimately try and replicate or even better what we did last season when we got into the playoffs and ultimately lost to Coventry City. So I'm really interested to hear what you think about Middlesbrough's January transfer window, what positions Middlesbrough need to be signing, or what players we need to be looking at, or what players Middlesbrough should be looking to move on potentially. Do drop into the comments below and let me know what you think. I'm really interested to hear what you think about it. If you have enjoyed this video, I'm hoping to do a few more as we move into the January transfer window. So please do like this video and please do subscribe to the channel. I'll be talking a lot about Middlesbrough because I'm a Middlesbrough supporter, and they are my bread and butter, the club that I know better than anyone, or better than any other clubs. Not saying that we know them better than any other journalists or anyone out there, because everyone's opinions are valid and all of that. But I will be also talking about some of the other clubs in the Championship as well. So if you are interested in hearing about some of them as well, then certainly hit subscribe. And yeah, there'll be hopefully some more videos over Christmas and going into the new year. So yeah, thank you for tuning in, and yeah, I'll catch up with you next time.